Welcome to the Earthworks Podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. This is Joel Simmons, and this is the Earthworks Podcast. I'm very excited. I have Mike Nowicki with me, who is at one of the golf courses I had the pleasure of visiting this year recently, actually. Victoria National Golf Club out in Newburgh, Indiana. And Mike, I think I told you this when I saw you. I probably was a little giddy when I was driving around with you, but I had wanted to be on that property for a long time. Every superintendent that I know, for some reason, loves playing your golf course. And after having ridden around with you and seen this property and how intense it is, I'm like, why? You just want to get your ass kicked on the golf course, don't you? I mean, it's a tough course, isn't it?
Yeah, it was built by a single owner, Mr. Terry Friedman, who essentially tasked Tom Fazio with building the toughest golf course ever built. The goal was to host a U.S. Open here. Now, obviously, as time has gone on, that's no longer the goal, and it's also really hard to get a major tournament to Evansville, Indiana.
Yeah,
the city
exactly.
just doesn't have the infrastructure to support that, but yeah, it wasn't built to be easy, when members always comment on it, and normally my response is, yeah, it's tough out there.
Yeah.
Sorry, you flew in to play it.
Yeah, I mean, you could see, I mean, I love the way you explained that. And I remember you saying that to me when we were riding around, that he brought Fazio in and said, make me something really hard. I mean, it's a beautiful piece of property. What was it before? It was a farm field?
No, well, a long time ago, it was probably just deciduous forest, but it was a strip coal mine for the Peabody.
Oh, that's right.
Company.
That's right. Sorry, I forgot that.
Yeah, so basically they had a huge shovel, which just think of an excavator times 10.
Yeah.
And it would dig these giant pits, and they would extract the coal from it, and that's what all the lakes and the water are. They're just we call them stripper pits here.
Yeah.
But they're just deep freshwater lakes.
So that were the coal mines at one point in time. Yeah.
Yep.
And so the course was built in 98.
Yep.
He brought in Fazio and basically said, make this thing incredible. And you've got these beautiful, holes in the ground from the coal mine. So that was part of his design plan. He just kind of worked around that. What makes it so hard? Why is it so? I mean, explain for folks that don't know it, and superintendents listening probably want to get out to Evansville and play this thing. But for folks that don't know it, explain. I don't even know how you would explain that property, but it is spectacular, by the way. I mean, I'm still giddy about being there.
Well, there's a couple agronomic reasons it's tough. Our natives, we're a little too far south, and it gets a little too hot here to grow fine fescue. So the natives are just kind of this weird combination of, there's tall fescue in them, there's blue grama grasses, there's witch's broom, there's side oats, there's all kinds of stuff, but essentially it's not what you would call playable. It's not that beautiful wispy fescue grasses. And then I believe 14 of our holes have water comes into play on them. So, a lot of golf courses, if you kind of slice one, maybe you're in rough, maybe you're in a native area. Here, you're just in water and out of play.
Yeah, or maybe, just gone. What's the average golf ball lossage on a round of golf as Victoria National?
It's advised. Most of our members, if they're bringing guests, they advise them buy a whole box.
Really? So it's that bad?
Oh, I'd put it at a dozen.
Yeah.
For people for your average player, your average 15 to 20 handicap, probably a dozen.
Wow, that really says a lot right there. So let's talk about something. You and I talked a lot about the agronomy of what you're dealing with there. You've got some pretty unique issues. I mean, first of all, that transition zone that you're in has got to be a challenge. Of course, you've lived transition zones in your career, but we'll come back to that. But talk about what the agronomy at Victoria National Golf Club's like. I mean, what's the big challenges?
Soil, water, and the environments.
Pretty much everything then, right?
Yeah,
you got it all.
Everybody deals with that. I'd say our soils are a little bit unique. We've sand capped the fairways to where now they've got a 6 to 8 inch sand cap on them. So those are getting both easier and harder to deal with. There's some negatives with having a sand cap, but we couldn't grow bent grass on the native soils, which are essentially it's what's called overburden. So it's stuff that came from 80 feet underground, and they would dig the pit and they would pile everything alongside the pit.
Yeah.
And that's what they built the golf course on. So the soils are it's kind of like a red, blue, sticky clay combination.
It's a
Uh,
subsoil essentially, right? I mean, it
yep.
really is a subsoil that you're
Yep.
trying to grow on. So did you have a choice but to sand cap when they built
Well,
the course?
so the original growing superintendent, Dale Minnick, they sodded the rough and they seeded the fairways. And for the first couple years, they just struggled hard with
Yeah.
the fairways down here. So he made the decision to start the top dressing process, and it's just something that's continued up until now. And this will actually be the first off season, I think, in 20 some years that we don't top dress fairways, just because we've
So,
got the sand cap now.
so the cap came from top dressing, not from
Yep.
construction. Yeah.
Nope.
So you built this up over all these years. So
Yes.
why stopping now? You're at the point where you're comfortable with it?
We're comfortable. I think that 6 to 8 inches is enough. The sand cap also. So the downside is you create a bit of a bathtub there
Yeah.
because it'll hit that clay and then it'll just sit there. And
Kick
sometimes
back
it'll
up.
actually wick the moisture
Yeah.
will wick back up. But also, so like last year, we first year on a new job, everybody wants to be super aggressive. So we were super aggressive in our top dressing program, and we put out 1,000 pounds per 1,000 square feet over the winter. And this year, it was just kind of apparent that we needed to go back in and start solving some of those layers. Because I mean, you think about it, you have a growing season, so you accumulate thatch, and then you top dress it and you aerify, but maybe you only affect 10% of the surface, and then you keep doing that.
Yeah.
So you just kind of get this kind of layer cake effect that we probably need to go back in, and I think we'll have a little bit better infiltration rates if we start to address that.
Yeah. One of my favorite photographs that I have in my slide set that I present when I do my academies is exactly that. It's that what I call the thatch layer, the thatch cake, and you can just see 5, 6, 7, 10 layers, because you're coming back in constantly top dressing. So what's the strategy to get through that? Are you poking holes a lot, or
Yeah, we poke. So we have a pretty odd schedule here. Basically, we don't disrupt the golf course when we're open, and we're open from April 1st to Thanksgiving, and we do all of our cultivation work in the off season. One of the positives of this climate is we never really go dormant, so you can
right?
aerify grass in January if you want. But this year we're going to pull a pretty aggressive core, probably 3/4 inch core on fairways. We might do it twice, and then we'll double verticut them with a machine called a VC60. So it's a fixed head verticutter that's pretty aggressive.
Have you used that before?
Yep.
Yeah.
And we'll do that probably for 2 years, and then we might look at reintroducing the top dressing program.
Seeing what it looks like after you beat it up a little bit.
Yep.
So when's the first aerification? Right after Thanksgiving?
Yep.
Yeah. So you guys don't have any time off at all then.
No, it's a wild schedule. We actually, the month of November, we slow down a little bit. It's still one of our, in terms of play, busier times a year. But no, we'll take a week off around Thanksgiving, and then it's right into all the construction projects, all the aerification, and basic dormant feeding
Yeah.
processes. All that stuff happens in the winter.
Yeah. So everything is going on from between until you open back up April 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's got to be a fun schedule. So you guys are working your tails off in the middle of the winter. And so what's it like during the season when you're just basically maintaining
Yep.
April 1 to November or to
Yep.
Thanksgiving?
Yep. Yeah, we have a small closure in the summer. We close for 7 to 10 days depending on the year, but like this year, that week we got like 4 inches of rain and the highs were all like 98, 101. So
Right.
and like, well, let's not do
That's
anything.
not working.
Let's just
Yeah.
leave it alone.
That's not a good thing to have
Yeah.
right now. So what's the
No.
intent, that you can get in there and actually do some aerification or some cultural things?
That if we needed to, if a
Yeah,
problem
yeah,
arose or something, that's
yeah.
kind of built into the schedule. And then it also helps us just kind of fix some busted stuff. We're pretty aggressive in terms of playability in the spring and fall here.
Yeah.
So with that, you not watering down here, you can get some dinged up grass. So that week kind of gives us a chance to, we call it aerification slash sodification.
Sodification. I like that.
But
Patching
it's
any holes that
basically,
you might need to fix.
yep, and
Yeah.
just kind of get it
Yeah.
buttoned up for the summer where expectations are a little bit lower and we're more just maintaining.
Yeah. Are you getting a lot of play in July and August?
No.
I would think you're pretty warm by then in Evansville, Indiana.
Yeah, basically we're pretty busy up until about the 4th of July. And
Yeah.
then it's a little bit of a ghost town here until last week of September, first week of October.
Oh, it's that it comes in that late. They don't come in right after Labor Day.
No,
And
no,
you,
because September's here are brutal. I forgot how bad September's
yeah,
here
yeah.
can be.
I think I was there in September. It was pretty nasty, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was pretty warm. I remember that. And you didn't have a ton of play. I mean, you had some folks running around, but we were able to get around without a whole lot of interference of golfers, which is always annoying when you're trying to do some work.
Yeah, no, it's a very well. I'm fortunate our ownership really targets us being great for the best times to play the golf course and the best times to agronomically present it, if that makes any sense.
Right, right. No, that does make sense. So you're busy right now, I assume. When we're recording this the day before Halloween,
Mm-hmm.
so you've got to be still pretty busy, I would assume. And the weather's good.
Weather's great. It's a high of 84, sunny, windy,
Yeah,
dry.
perfect. Are you usually windy on that property?
Not in the summer, but in the fall and winter, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a lot like Richmond, Virginia, where about June 1st, like
yeah.
you don't see a wind
It's
gust again
right.
until
Just
after
stagnant
September.
and miserable, hot, humid, and kind of stuff. Let's talk a little bit about the golf course itself. I mean, there's some pretty. I mean, I again, I've been talking you guys up a lot since I saw you a month or so back, and there's just some holes on that property that I can't even as a really bad golfer. I'm not going to play this. I mean, there was some you had some carries that were like 200 and some yards, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's not I mean it's spectacular as a fan of architecture and I have to say I think it's one of my favorite Fazio courses, but it's just so unique in what he had to work with, and working around all those coal mines obviously brought him a lot of challenges. But is there any one hole that's the same? I mean, it's just such a unique playing golf course.
Yeah, no, it's I'd I'd say comfortably everybody would want to say there's 18 signature holes out here, but realistically, there's 15. Like
Yeah.
you take to any other property and it's like, oh, that's the signature hole here.
Yeah, I would agree. That's very true. I mean, it's funny you say that because I was thinking that as I was riding around, but every one of them could really stand out in any one property. I mean, and they're all unique. I mean, there's some really interesting, Fazio uniqueness to it, and then a lot of different carries and a lot of different structures. But so let's talk about you had been there once before and then you came back. So
Yeah,
let's go
so
through your background a little bit. I mean, I have a little laundry list of here, and I knew you spent some time in Virginia. I think we met in Virginia way back when.
probably.
Yeah, back at Kinloch days. But anyway, go through your career a little bit. Let's talk about it. And I want to get into some of your agronomic concepts as we wrap up. But let's go through where you've been. You've been around a lot of places.
Yeah, so after high school, typical like started off at Holy Cross College, kind of the feeder college to Notre Dame University. Grew up in that area, and it was just the typical superintendent story. Like, had no idea what I really wanted to do. Worked at Notre Dame's golf course. I was fortunate to work for a great superintendent there, Matt Seeland, who after a few years of working there, I was just kind of like, like I don't really want to keep going down this weird, I don't know what major I want to declare. I don't,
Yeah.
So I talked to Matt a little bit and asked if I could intern for him my third year there. And he said yes and stuff. And I had no education in turf at the time. And so I did that and learned a ton. And I was just talking with him towards the end of the year. And he said, you need to probably, if you really think you want to do this, you need to go to a top 100 facility, was kind of the in vogue terminology at the time.
Yeah.
You need to go to a really high-end club and see how they operate things and see if this is really for you. Because like right now, you're all your knowledge is this place.
Yeah.
And every place does it differently, and there's millions super intense operations out there. So I applied to a couple of places. I applied to Crooked Stick and I applied to Victoria National just as a summer internship, and was fortunate
And you had
to
no degree at this point, right? You had no
no degree.
degree. Yeah.
I went to school while I interned here. Actually, I worked here for 3 years. Um, and I went to school in the winter during those years. But I was fortunate enough to be offered by both clubs. I picked this one, and it was very, very eye-opening. I worked for
Do tell, please.
well, I worked for I was hired by a guy named Matt White, who's now the director of agronomy at Vaquero Club in Dallas. And he had accepted that position after I was offered the opportunity to work for him. And so my first year here was working for a guy, Kyle Callahan, who's had a phenomenal career, but it was his first job. And you can imagine this place is your first
Yeah, I
superintendent
can't
job.
imagine that as your first job.
It was a lot. It was a very eye-opening experience. A lot of hours, a lot of learning. Kyle was very focused on making sure that, if we were doing something, we knew why we were doing it.
Good.
If you're spraying something, you better know what the active ingredients are. You better
Yeah.
know all this stuff.
And why you're spraying it. Yeah. What
And
you're
why
looking
you're
for. Yeah.
spraying it,
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just intense. And then
Was that difficult? I mean, that sounds like schooling. I mean, it really sounds like you're in school.
it was weird. I didn't find it difficult really at all. I found it super interesting. And then it was just, you didn't have with Kyle, you didn't really have time to think about how difficult it was.
Right.
Um,
Just go.
you were always going, but that and then the watering down here was just totally different because, Southern Michigan, Northern Indiana, yeah, you just go out, you water wilt in the afternoon and it's fine. Here it's like, oh no, you have to make like 10 loops and
Yeah, your sand.
don't overwater it, or it's
When you were there as an intern, was the sand cap as established as it is now? I mean, was it already
yeah, it was
in place?
probably 4 or 5 inches.
Okay,
But
so
yeah.
you were still capped at that point. You had enough sand in there that you're working off of that. So you're pulling hoses a lot because of that, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the summer here we have usually a guy per hole or a guy per every 2 holes.
Wow.
It's not uncommon to have 21 guys out in the afternoons with hoses.
Really?
Yeah.
So you guys are the best hose pullers in the business.
Well, maybe we're the worst, and that's why we need 21.
Well said. Yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, but you got to be, you at least you got muscles now. You're pulling hose all day long. It's got to be, so you're constantly chasing that sand cap.
Yeah, you chase the sand cap. You chase the rough here quite a bit.
Yeah. And the rough is that native, what we called subsoil. That's what you're working off of there.
Yep.
Now, has that gotten better from a soil standpoint since you've been there? Or is it still just crap?
It's still crap. I think that through close to 30 years now of having turf on it, it's starting to build the soil. But I mean, you think about a good soil, it takes to do it just naturally, takes thousands of years to build it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's definitely not great. But we have some tricks that we use. We spray wetting agents on it about once a month. That's made a huge difference in the rough.
I can imagine.
But yeah, it was coming down and seeing all that and being like super green was pretty eye-opening.
I can imagine. to that too. Let me go back to your internship. So you get to Victoria National, and this place is not easy. Agronomically, it's not easy. I mean, it's a tough place to be. What were you thinking? I mean, are you still thinking this is the career for me, or are you
Yeah.
starting to question what you were doing?
No, it reinforced it because you learn pretty quickly that if you can do it here or like Kenlock, you can probably figure it out anywhere.
Yeah,
So, it made everything later on in my career a little bit easier, if
because you
that
went
makes
through it
sense.
all. Yeah, yeah,
Because you're so much is expected of you, and you don't know how to meet those expectations,
yeah.
and you're young. I think I was 21 when I came down here. So I got the hard stuff out of the way early.
Did you learn enough there to working in those 3 years to kind of set a management tone for yourself? I mean, did you? I can't imagine you didn't learn some management skill sets that you might have, wanted to follow, or ones that you didn't want to follow as you started to move up the ladder. I mean,
Yeah,
it had to be an interesting 3 years.
you learn both.
Yeah,
You learn both everywhere you go and stuff you take with you. Um, I would say no, that wasn't really my focus. It was more gaining the technical skills and knowledge to be proficient at everything that I
yeah.
did. Um, I was not, which I still question if I'm a good manager, but
Well, I
um,
hope so. We all should, right?
yeah, but the management stuff I really learned from Ken Locke.
Yeah, working
That
with
was
Trevor. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the eye-opening experience there.
Well, let's go there. So you left where to go to Kinloch? Did you go from?
Northmore Country Club. So from here, after 3 years down here, I was presented the opportunity to fill an assistance role at a high-end country club, north side of Chicago.
Right.
And, like you start talking to people and mapping out your career, and you're like, oh, this is a great move. And I got up there, and this is no negative on anybody that worked there, but it was just like, after being down here, it was just boring.
You weren't in the transition zone. You weren't
Wasn't in
pulling,
the transition
you weren't
zone. It's
pulling hoses all day long. You kind of
cold
like that
seven
stuff.
months a year.
Right.
Like,
So we're
so,
better to go than Richmond, Virginia on a 100% bent grass golf course. You seem to
right,
have this masochistic or feeling about going, let's make this as difficult as we can possibly make it, you know?
right. Well, I remember
That's a little
when I
screwy, you know
interviewed
that? It's
well,
good.
when I interviewed at Ken Lock for the senior assistant's position, I got off the plane in Richmond, and it was June. I was like, oh my God, this is
Yeah,
not
exactly.
Chicago.
Yeah, you're not in Chicago anymore for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that had to be a little eye opener. Let's talk a little bit about Kinloch. Kinloch, of course, is a course that we know very well. We were involved in the construction with Pete Went when he was there, but it's 100% bent grass, the first one in Richmond, Virginia. It's a spectacular golf course, but it's a tough market, man. I mean, it's all bent grass, and there you are, and humidity from May to October. And I mean, you probably came to that with some pretty good experience, having been in a pretty similar environment, although agronomically you're dealing with different things. What was it like?
Yeah, I'd say that's a big reason that I was kind of taken seriously as a candidate. But Kinlock's unique because it's very, very difficult property to take care of. I mean, to say Trevor has his hands full is a
Oh yeah,
massive
no, no,
understatement.
no question. And he's done a
You
great
have
job.
expectations of Augusta National year round.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
So it's
not an
it's
easy membership.
not an easy membership at all. But the thing there is just the attention to detail. And it's kind of a funny story of how I got that job. Was I remember looking at the job posting, and it said clear as day at the end of it, mail your resume and cover letter to this address. And I was the only candidate that did that. Everybody else emailed it. So that put me to kind of a little bit ahead of everybody else while having a little bit worse resume. I mean, some of the candidates I interviewed a senior assistant's position at Kinlock was,
Yeah, I would think that'd be
you
pretty
know,
competitive.
and I was looking back on it, I was certainly not ready for the position, but I was just fortunate that the culture there is everybody kind of helped me
Yeah, yeah.
learn how they did things and the expectation and
What's the name of the bar up the street? I always forget. Red Hawk?
Sunset.
Sunset now. It used to
Yeah,
be.
during my interview, we ate there like 4 times.
Yeah, well, that's the only place that we. Yeah, I've spent many an afternoon there. It's like I'm not proud of that, I don't think, but yeah, it's a great little place to hang. No, that's a
Yeah,
great property.
I'm sure the bartenders there were happy to see me come to Indiana.
Oh yeah, or not maybe depending on.
Or not, yeah.
Yeah, I
I
was
don't
gonna
know if they're
say.
still in business.
Yeah, I was going to say you kept him going for a while, but of course Kinlock's still there, so I'm sure they're still hanging out at the Sunset, which is kind of good. Kinlock is a Lester George design, probably his signature golf course, and I mean it's pretty unique. I mean compared to what you were doing at Victoria National, I mean it had to be a bit of an eye opener based on just what it is. I mean wall to wall bent grass and that on that environment. I mean that's got to be. I mean there's a lot of. Were you pulling hoses as much there? You didn't have a
Oh
sand.
yeah.
Yeah, you didn't have
Yeah.
the sand cap, but you had, you know,
Well, those fairways are sand capped now.
they are now. Yeah, they weren't built
Yeah.
that way. Yeah.
No, but yeah, every bit as much. We had some difficult years. The summer of 2018, I just remember was just a absolute. It was a lot like this year, only wet, but it was hot, super late.
Yeah.
And that, it was a very, very long year and learned a ton. But also at the time, they've since converted them to HGT bluegrass, but we had perennial ryegrass intermediate cuts.
Yeah.
And trying to keep those things alive through a Richmond summer was difficult.
Yeah, it's funny because everybody says that where you are now is the hardest place to grow, or St. Louis. But I think that Richmond market and Kinlock, that's got to be one of the hardest places to maintain that level of quality in this country. I mean, you've been at both
Yeah.
now, so it's going to
Um,
be.
Objectively, I'd say June and July is much more difficult in Richmond. It gets
Yeah.
hotter earlier. We stay hotter a little bit later, but Richmond, I mean, 2018 is a great example. The low temperature didn't drop below like 83 degrees for 60 some days.
Right.
So
Yeah.
here it's very hot and it's very humid in the summer, but we have fluctuations. So like we'll have a week where it'll be 105, 110, and then a cool front will come through.
Yeah.
And you might get some nighttime lows down into the high 60s, mid 60s. Richmond, you just don't get that. It's consistently 95 to
Miserable. Yeah,
98
pretty
with
much. Yeah, it's
75-degree dew point and a low
yeah.
of 81, you know?
Gee, let's see what tomorrow's going to bring. Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
same. It's just
No, it's
miserable.
gonna, so they both have their challenges, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why I picked staying in them.
Yes,
That's
that was going to be one of my questions. Like I said, you're obviously a masochist. You obviously have this desire to get beat up all the time. So, yeah, you bounce back and forth between two. And the way you've spoken to me about Kinlock, you really had a great experience there. I mean, it sounded like you just had a wonderful experience. I mean, and it sounds like I mean, I after having really had a chance to work with you, it's you certainly have a strong agronomic, understanding, and it sounds like you picked up a lot of that in Virginia. I mean, just having to
yeah.
deal with that constant stress. I mean, what's the big takeaway from Richmond, Virginia?
Uh, Keep the soils healthy and don't shoot yourself in the foot. Don't put too many things in that spray tank. Don't aerify at the wrong time. Don't,
Yeah. Well, sometimes
don't-
that's got to be dicey. I mean, back in 18, weren't we doing more witches brews, or were we keeping the
oh,
spray tank kind of simple?
well, no, Kinlock. Well, that's where I kind of learned that. There were, you think a place like that's going crazy with 15 things in every tank and
Yeah.
stuff. And At the time, we tissue tested greens and we applied nitrogen based on what the tissue test recommended. There were multiple greens, teas, fairway sprays with just 2, 3 products in them.
Good. Yeah.
You know, if the grass is growing really well, do you need to fertilize it?
Right. That's a great question. And you're talking to a fertilizer salesman. So yeah,
Yeah.
I know how I would answer that is, absolutely not. Less is more in this case. And
Yeah, so
and that doesn't
um
help my business much, but that's okay because that's that's the right thing to do.
yeah. Yeah, so really just kind of simplifying a lot of the programs when it gets hot and then managing moisture.
Yeah.
They Kinlock does that really, really well. It's a lot like here. It's a really hard property to water correctly. Um, Actually, it might be more difficult because instead of a bunch of native areas, they just have rough. They have 110 acres of rough on these crazy slopes and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So keeping moisture where you're not worried about wet wilt, but you're not really worried about too much dry wilt either is a art form that I think that place
Yeah.
gets really, really, really right.
You use that term art form. I mean, I think good irrigation, good watering is an art. And, I remember when I was at Rutgers teaching and we would, everybody would ask, what's the trick? And I don't know, can you teach watering? I mean, you can,
Oh
but
yeah.
I mean, what's the best way to teach an intern, a new kid coming in, how to water properly? And what are the
You
tricks
have
that
to.
they?
So this is the hard one. You have to get them. Ugh, I'm gonna piss people off. Uh,
That's okay.
you have to throw the moisture meter away, and not literally throw it away, but take it away from them. And you have to get them to understand what moisture stress looks like, both
Beautiful. I
too
love
much
that
or
idea.
too little.
Yeah. No, I mean that makes perfect sense to me. I mean that's because that's again it's the intuitiveness of watering that makes you a good water. I think Trevor is a good water. I mean Pete Went is a phenomenal water manager. I mean, but that's an art that I've seen a lot of guys lose their jobs just because they can't figure that intuitiveness of that skill set. So when you get a young guy, so you're taking the meter away and you tell them to just water and what are they looking for? What's the trick?
Footprinting.
There you go.
Footprinting's our first sign for it here. Um, so basically we start interns out watering tees and fairways, and then as they progress, they get to go on greens. Tees and fairways are pretty easy. You can see
Yeah.
the moisture stress, but
Yeah.
greens obviously a little bit harder. So we really teach footprinting. We have a system here where basically the golf course is broken up into sections and there's always at least 2 people per section looping kind of behind each other. So a green never goes more than 30 minutes without somebody
Somebody
walking
looking
on
at
it.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
And usually the interns are thrown in that loop with a more senior level assistant so that the assistant's always there to catch them and explain,
Yeah.
what they missed because their first couple months they miss a lot or they're watering the wet spot and she's like, "What
Right.
are you doing?"
Yeah, I mean
Uh,
that's yeah, and I can understand that as a novice. I mean, I could see where it would take a while to really get that skill set down. I mean, I ask a lot of people here on the podcast about the trick of watering because getting somebody off the street and then putting a hose in their hand, I mean, that's, like giving them a Ferrari and having them drive down, 25-mile-an-hour road. I mean, what do you really, do you know what you're doing with this thing? Uh,
right.
but that's I love the footprinting idea. I think that's pretty clever. But do you ever bring back the meter?
We use them a little bit in the mornings.
Yeah,
And I have one in my cart that, if I'm riding around in the afternoon, I'll throw it in a couple greens and say that we're consistently averaging below 10% on a green. We might choose to run the overheads on the
yeah.
greens that evening just to bump everything up. But
But you're not living to that number.
no,
Yeah,
no.
you're. So let me ask you this. So you've been in Chicago, you've been in Richmond, and now in Victoria. Is there a big difference between managing water in those three areas of the country? Are you
Yeah, yeah. Well,
what's it
so it's
feel like?
weird. Chicago, we had affluent water, so that came with
Okay,
a number
problems.
of issues. Um, Richmond, at least for Kinloch, Lakeside, and most of the first tee facilities, the water was almost too clean, so it
Yeah,
would strip.
yep.
Um, and then here we have the opposite problem. We have water that's pretty high and really high in bicarbonates and surprisingly high in salts for being in the middle of the country.
Is it
Um,
coming out of those quarries? Is that where your water's all coming out of those old coal pits?
yes.
So you're pulling stuff out of whatever the hell's down in the bottom of that hole.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the water is high bicarbonates, but it's also sodic.
Yep.
Yeah, at Victoria.
Moderately. I wouldn't quite say
Yeah,
high. It's just that number kind of jumps off when you're like,
yeah,
we're in Indiana, you
yeah.
know?
Let me go back. You said something that intrigues me, and I want to explain a little bit. But you were at a couple places. Apparently, I'm assuming that was Kinloch, where the water was too clean.
Hmm.
That's a phrase that I don't think everybody really understands. So, waters have this need to find equilibrium. And if they're clean, that means they're void of some of the mineral content that a normal water would have. So what it's going to do chemically, it's going to start to strip off nutrients from your soils to create that equilibrium. So at Kinloch, you were putting out water that was taking away your nutrients. So you would have to have gone back and started to really evaluate. How do you monitor that? What's the trick in when your water is clean? How you know when you need to get back with fertility?
We use tissue testing and soil testing. Tissue testing was a weekly thing with us.
Are you
Um,
still doing tissue testing now?
I don't anymore.
What happened?
I moved around too much and just haven't implemented it yet.
Oh, okay. Are you a big believer still?
I'm a believer in how you assign, and if you can quantify what you're seeing.
Yeah.
So, there's not we could tissue test our greens and they might say, oh, you're at a 0.5% nitrogen in the tissue, you need to apply. And I can go out there and say these greens are great and performing perfectly for what we need them to do at 0.5%. So we're not
And
going to apply.
right. Yeah. Well, again, exactly. It's a tool, but you also could test 4 hours later and it would be radically different.
Right, and that's where it's not. But you do start to, and Trevor made a spreadsheet, but you just get baseline
Yeah.
numbers and he would take that and he'd say, if we're at this percentage for this many weeks, these are my green speeds, this is how much grass we're pulling off the greens, this is where we were with PGR usage, like, and he had a spreadsheet that he took everything, and
Are
that's
you
how
are you a spreadsheet guy?
I'm not.
No.
I'm gonna
But
go look at it,
yeah,
make
yeah.
a decision on the spray the next day, guy, and then question why I made that decision while we're spraying.
Right, and then go back and do it all over again.
Yep.
Very early on in my career, I was talking to, I believe it was Glenn Smickley, who was, of course, the builder of RTJ. But Glenn told me that he would rather have a guy on staff that's intuitive and can go out there and see things than have to sit there and stare at a spreadsheet. And I don't mean any criticism, because I actually think having that kind of data is a way to build intuitiveness. I mean, it reinforces. That's why I'm asking you about that. The moisture meter. It would reinforce the intuitiveness of learning how to truly water. But yeah, I mean, you obviously are an intuition superintendent, which is can get you into trouble sometimes. But I think at the end of the day, it keeps you strong, for a long, long time. Let me talk to you about the area that you're in, and one thing that I'm intrigued by is you had a pretty good crew out there and some really good guys. How hard is it to get good people in the middle of Indiana in Evansville?
Uh, hard, hard. That's been probably the single most difficult thing here. When I took this position, there were 8 full-time employees and then 3 older gentlemen that helped us mow fairways. And so I accepted the position in November of 2022 and got here. And at that time, we had a Corn Ferry Tour Championship at the end of
Yep.
2023. So televised event at the end of the year after Evansville summer.
Right.
with
Great
8
timing.
people. You know,
Yeah.
I'm looking around like
No problem.
I'm looking around at some of the guys and I'm like, oh, this is
Yeah.
gonna be hard. So yeah, it's really hard. That first year, it was just kind of a hire everybody that comes to the door and train them, and if they don't work out within a couple of weeks, we're probably gonna part ways. And then through that, we built a pretty good base of people, and then this year we've just expanded on that base by working with some local churches and charities that help refugees. So we have on our staff, we have 5 people from Syria, 1 guy from Mauritania, which is the least densely populated country on
Yeah.
Earth. I've had
In
to
the
learn a
world.
lot
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember talking to you about that.
Kenyan, 2 Venezuelans. Yeah, so it's a pretty, and then a bunch of local kids and a bunch of high school kids as well. But
Talk
yeah,
about
it's
those guys, though. I mean, you and I talked about them. I mean, you really spoke quite highly of that group that you have, and the especially the immigrants.
yeah, well, it's an odd group. You know, our morning
Yeah, it sounds
meetings
like
are
it.
in 3 to 4 different languages. They're being
Right.
French, Arabic, Spanish, and English.
That's
So it
easy.
yeah, it's
You
Google
speak them all
Translate.
fluently, I assume. I can. You've learned them all
Well,
by now.
no, and Google Translate in Arabic. Well, they need to
Yeah,
do some work
I can't
because
imagine. Yeah. So how do you communicate?
through a
Enough
lot of
broken
Google
English?
Translate. Obviously, we're trying to learn all the languages. I'm lucky at from my time at particularly Kenlock. I'm pretty fluent in Spanish.
Yeah.
But Arabic's a challenge because it's a different alphabet, different number
Oh my
system.
God, it's a difficult
You
language.
go
I
right
can't
to left
imagine.
instead of left to right.
Right. It's a
You
different
know,
word for everything. It's amazing.
yeah. But we use Google Translate quite a bit. The guys are trying to learn English, so we have. But it's funny, we assign different words for things because, like in Syria, there's not really a word for golf green. So the
Oh, really?
closest word that we could get to understand
Yeah.
is stadiums. So to them, our greens are, go mow the stadiums.
Oh, there we go. Hey, as long as they
Yeah.
get it, right?
Yep. Jezel Akhtar, I believe is go mow. But
Well, you're
yeah, it's
learning. I love
our
that. That's
fairways are just
yeah.
called the insides because there's not really a word for fairways.
Right. Yeah, because there's probably not golf over there
No.
or
And we
much
haven't had
anyway.
them try to mow the intermediates yet, but the fairways are the insides and the rough is the outsides.
Yeah.
We don't know what we're going to call the intermediates.
Wow, great. You got to come up with another word. Yeah, something. So
But
you were speaking very highly of them when we were riding around. I mean, it sounds like you've got a really. I mean, these guys are really good workers. I mean,
they're wonderful.
yeah,
They've saved us, and we're still in the infancy of building a great culture here, I'd say.
yeah,
But we're 10 times what we were last year.
yeah.
And they're a huge part of that. And then the guys that we've hung on to since last year are also a huge part of that. And it's just fun. We don't have really a lot of fights. We don't have a lot of drama with our staff. They all just kind of get along.
Well, that's nice.
It is kind of fun watching, an older gentleman from, Southern Indiana or Western Kentucky take out his Google Translate and translate
Yeah.
Arabic to the guy he's mowing rough with.
Hey,
Um,
diversity, man. That's what the world is all about, right?
it's
I
it's
think it's
wonderful.
wonderful. Yeah. And they seemed like they were really happy. And, I mean, obviously I couldn't communicate very well with some of your guys, but they seem like they're doing their job. And you found these folks through the church? Is that how you found them?
Well, we had a guy apply and we called him and
Oh, yeah. I remember you
he
telling me
just
this.
answered
Yeah.
the phone and said, no English and hung up.
Yeah. I remember you. Yeah. Tell me that story again. That's great.
And so in my head, I'm looking at our assistants and I'm like, that's what we want. Like, just keep calling him and keep bugging him. Like,
Right.
whatever language he speaks, let's figure out how to say job. Because he figured out how to apply for the job.
Right.
Um, so we did
You had the
that.
right guy. I mean, you're calling the right person.
Yeah.
Good.
So I was like, I bet you that he has a bunch of friends, and I could tell that it was a Middle Eastern accent with them. So, I knew that they were, since they had no understanding of English, they were probably pretty new in the country. It was probably not just him. He probably had a bunch of people that were looking for work.
Right. And they were
Um,
in the Evansville area. Is that they were living in the area?
yep, yep. They had migrated to Evansville. Why they pick Evansville, I don't know. There's a lot of charity work around here that I think brings them here
Good.
because it's pretty affordable to live here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so his name is Fawaz. And then so we interviewed Fawaz. Fawaz brought his son Muhammad, and his friend Abed. And so we hired all three of them, and then they had
Perfect.
worked here for a couple weeks. And then he asked if his other son, Khalid, could have a job, and we said yeah. And then Muhammad's like, hey, like my friend El Makhdar Amin is on a boat from Mauritania coming here. Can
From
he have a
where?
job?
From what?
And in my
I don't
head,
know.
I'm just like,
What?
that
Bring
poor
them all.
HR lady. Like,
Yeah.
hey, like I have a guy, he's not here yet, but he's gonna be here. Can we hire him? You know?
That's right. And
It,
you're in a corporate setting in Victoria. You're part of the Dormy network, so you had to go through. How's that structure work with Dormy and you guys? I mean, what
so we're obviously part of Dormy Network.
do you have
It's
to go?
just
Is it HR Dormy or is it a Victoria National?
no, it's Dormy. She's
Okay.
our HR team's great. I'd love to give them shout outs whenever
Yeah.
I can. But it's a corporate-ish setting with that stuff. It's pretty compartmentalized. So
Yeah.
every club operates kind of as its own, but we have a unique thing where if you're a member at one club, you're kind of a member at all clubs.
Yeah.
And it's a single ownership type thing, single family ownership. So it's actually it's wonderful to be honest because if you need to get something done or you need help or say you have a problem, there's always somebody, you can always be pointed in the direction of a person that can help you with that problem,
That's nice. Yeah, that's
and
good.
it's a huge resource that,
Yeah.
now that I have it, we utilize it a lot. And we've got people that are just smart at everything, incredibly smart at land development, vertical construction, uh, planning, water management planning, watershed planning.
Oh
There's
wow.
a
For
there's a whole
construction, yeah.
group of people that do that because every facility has done a bunch of work with both vertical construction, golf course renovations, and they just needed experts in all these fields.
Yeah. That's, do you have an agronomist that comes and is Dormy have agronomists that kind
We
of
do.
come
His
around?
name's Clint Talbert. He's titled the Chief Agronomic Officer.
Okay. Oh, that's right. You and I
Um,
talked about that. Yeah. So Clint comes around and supports you in whatever ways he can. Yeah.
Yep, super supportive, super
Yeah.
cool career. He was actually the superintendent at Nanea Golf Club in Hawaii.
Oh, wow. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, but really good dude. And then we've got a great executive team that, whenever there's an issue or something, it's a discussion on how to solve it instead of
Yeah.
a like.
So let me go back to this labor force that you bring this concept to these folks and they're like, what? You want to do what? He's where? He's
Oh,
how
well,
did that go over?
it's better than the first one I brought to him. So when we
Oh,
had the
great.
8 people, I don't tell a lot of people this, but we had I got here and we had 8 people, and I'm like trying to aerify the golf course, trying to get it ready for the season, trying to get some stuff growing in, and I'm getting like pretty frustrated. So I emailed all the high school guidance counselors, thinking,
Oh,
oh, this will be
beautiful.
great. We'll get a bunch of football players and stuff to apply. Well, however the hell I worded that greenskeeper position, there's a high school up the road, Castle High School, but like damn near their whole cheerleading team applied.
Great.
I was just like, all right.
Were they good? I hired
Uh,
them all.
yeah, they got us through aerification.
Oh, you actually brought them in.
Oh yeah.
Of course you
Hey,
did. Why wouldn't you?
people got to know what they want to do in life and
Yeah,
don't want to do.
exactly. I mean,
Like
there's
this is a
some, yeah.
perfect opportunity. Go put a backpack blower on for 12 hours.
Oh, great. That's too funny. How many people left after 2 hours?
Most of them stuck it out. Actually, none of them just up and quit. Now, within a week, most of them came in and were like, "Hey, like this isn't for me."
Right. Yeah, I don't want to do
Jokingly,
this.
like, "Yeah, I know."
But you never got the football players.
No, never got the football
Yeah.
players. But no, they were receptive. Dormy Network has a branch of it, the Dormy Network Foundation,
Yeah.
that is basically it's a philanthropic foundation that helps all walks of life, all sectors of different communities. So they were ecstatic about it.
Yeah. So you really kind of come up with some pretty creative ways to get crew on there.
Yes.
I love that. I mean, I love this, this this network that you've built from one guy coming in from wherever, and now you've got this whole crew, and they're good. I mean,
Mhm.
they seem to really be, working. Where do you have to house them? What's the setup for guys like
We
this?
don't. We have the ability to house them, but we don't house. They all have
They're all local.
house or an apartment complex in downtown Evansville.
Okay, so they're close to the course, and they get to work on time, and they do their thing,
Yep.
which is good. And they'll be there through the winter and help you through aerifications and all
Yeah.
the stuff you're doing. So they're full time. They're year round.
Yep. They're all full time. We keep. I do things a little bit differently. I'd say that you could have 50 people on this property in
Yes, you
terms of
could.
an agronomy team, and you still wouldn't get stuff done. But I try to keep a little bit higher winter staff, so we'll be in that like almost 20
Good.
full-time range, and then we'll flex up with a couple high school kids and stuff to get to about 30 in the summer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Instead of laying a bunch of people off and then trying to rehire a bunch of
And
people.
hope they come back and half of them don't or most of them don't. Yeah.
And we do enough construction in the winter that everybody's busy.
Right, right. How do you teach a guy that really doesn't speak the language? I mean, Spanish is one thing because a lot of us in this industry can speak enough that we can get through. But now you're talking Arabic and other languages. How do you teach a guy like that out of water? You know?
Slowly, but you basically draw on their experiences. We had so Abed, one of our guys was some version of a horticulturalist in Syria before their civil war.
Oh, oh, good.
And so we can talk to him and we can have him explain, like drought stress and wilting and stuff to some of the other guys.
Oh, good.
And that's about the only way that we've had success. But they get it. I mean, they understand, if the bent grass is turning purple, water it.
Bad. Yeah, purple bad.
Bad,
Yeah.
water it.
Yeah. Hold up a card of purple. Bad, bad.
Yes.
Yeah. Put an X through it. I guess they would understand that. Yeah. So
Yep.
the little steps that would make it all work well. That's pretty clever though, that you've gotten that much you've been able to get people and from some pretty creative ways. I mean, I think that's great. I mean, networking, of course, has got to be one of the best, especially in a community like yours.
Yeah. No, it's just never putting yourself in a box,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something Trevor would come up with a list pretty much every week at Kenlock, and it looked insurmountable. And then by Thursday, you've already got it done. And it was always forcing you to come up with creative ways to do things.
Yeah. Yeah.
We always
So
joke he thought we had 75 people on staff.
yeah, he wanted 75, but yeah, that wasn't going to happen. Yeah, well, that attention to detail though at Kinlock is pretty intense. So I could see why he would want 75 people.
Yes.
Let me kind of wrap up by asking you and getting into your head about your agronomic concepts and principles. I mean, you've got a pretty unique background. You've been in some pretty unique places, but from a truly soil standpoint, what's your belief system? I mean, what do you follow from managing it from soils up?
So it's a little odd, but think of a soil as kind of your baseline.
Yeah,
So we don't do a lot of synthetic granular fertility. It's basically all earthworks type products. I'm not gonna say we never do it. If you have a certain area
of
that
course
you
not.
really need to get grown in, of
Yeah,
course,
yeah,
but that slow feed, that kind of larger bank account
yeah.
of
I love that term.
um of nutrients is kind of where we lean with that.
Yeah,
Um, and then it's interesting, but it's almost trying to get the soils to a point where they're almost self-sustaining.
Yeah.
Um,
Can you do
I
that on a
haven't figured
sand
out
cap?
how to do that yet,
I
but
was gonna say on a sand cap, that's not an easy thing,
no.
you know.
But I think that,
And your greens are sand.
yep,
Yeah.
USGA.
So you're sand everywhere.
Yep,
Yeah. That's a little harder.
it is.
Where did this come from in your career? Where did you pick up these concepts? Or is it just intuitive?
No, not intuitive at all. The greens at Kinlock. So when my first day there, I'm out cutting cups and stuff and learning their way to cut cups. Um, and I'm taking plugs out and I'm like, God, this profile is disgusting. Like we need to aerify, right? Because up until then, everything you're taught is just sand, sand, sand,
Right.
sand. Organic matter bad.
Organic bad. Yeah, yeah. So go
And
ahead. I love this story.
yeah, I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is awful.
Right.
And then, we go through the summer and the greens are flawless and they're always fast and
And there's
they
roots
never
down to the
grow too
bottom of the
much.
cup.
We don't struggle with diseases. We don't struggle really with infiltration rates anymore. So I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, exactly. What the what
You
was the
know?
answer? What did they tell you?
Well, just basically, I cornered Trevor and I was like, "How did you guys like? Do you remember anything about the construction?" And Kinlock has a long lineage of super successful assistants, and so everything
Oh yeah.
refers kind of back to the assistants that were there when they were doing
Oh
it.
yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
it came back to like how all the amendments that went into the construction of those greens, and I never have asked Pete why he originally picked all that, but and basically that
I bribed him, I think, is how it happened. I paid him off, and it
they
worked.
had gone out and push spread the greens prior to seeding with 5 or 6 amendments, so they're effectively going across them like 5 or 6 times, and the assistants at the time were not very happy about
No, they
having
were
to do
very
that.
unhappy. There's a story here that we're building up to. You know that, I think. This is
Yeah,
this is where Renovate was built.
yeah, yeah.
Because so Renovate, you've got some of that in house. It's basically a package that's designed to mimic a soil in a soilless medium. But we didn't have Renovate when Kinlock was built. We had all the raw materials, and there's 20 some raw materials in there. And so there were dozens and dozens. There was a dozen different raw materials that they had to spread by hand. And then Pete goes, "Why the hell can't you just put this shit in a bag?" I'm like, "Oh, that's actually pretty brilliant." So it became Renovate Plus. But I'm thrilled that you brought this up because it's near and dear to my heart. But that profile that you had at Kinlock is one of the best, I think, in the country, and it really drives home a strong point. And when you look at that organic profile, and your reaction to that is exactly what I think 99 to 100% of the superintendents that would look at that and say, "Oh my goodness, that's not what we want." But what you're looking at there is a very good organic profile, and it's it's a 4, 5, 6 inch profile of humus being built. It's humification going on, and like you said, they work through the summer because they're holding moisture, they're holding biology. There's an awful lot of biology there helping to move nutrients. It's not thatch. When you run that through your fingers, it crumbles. It's not stemmy and sticky and all that kind of stuff. But that's fascinating. That I love your story that you pulled a cup and you look at this and like, oh, this is crap. And I think that's what I actually show a picture in my class of that profile, and there's a picture of Pete's foot in it, is one of his shoes in the background. But I asked that, I'll have 20 or 30, superintendents in the room. I say, is this a good profile? And every one of them will say, oh, no, that's horrible. Same reaction that you had. But in fact, as you just stated, it's a phenomenal profile, and it produces roots, and strong roots, and moisture and nutrients flow and biology and checks and balances for pathogens. I think that's a great study in what a good profile looks like.
Yeah, and it's it was very eye-opening.
Good.
God, I feel like I've said eye-opening about 1,000,000 times.
That's all right. That's what this is. Every day you're going to have something that's going to open your eyes.
Well, it's a good thing, but it was opposite of what I had been exposed to before,
Yeah,
and the results were wonderful, and the playability of the greens were wonderful. They
beautiful.
could
Yeah,
get, and we would, speaking of TDRs, we would hit numbers, 3, 4, 5%, and they weren't wilting yet. And
yeah.
um,
You had humus. You were humified. I
yep,
mean, that's what humification will do for a green is it'll hold moisture and keep it, and again, it changes your whole intuition on how you're gonna, manage that stuff. But yeah, that's what you want because it's sustainable.
yep,
And I hate that word because it's overused, but it's pretty interesting. But and now you're on a sand cap, so you've got to try to figure out a way to get that, and not only in the sand cap, but in that native soil. I mean, you can humify that as well. It'll take you maybe a better part of your lifetime, but hopefully you're planning on sticking around there for a while. What's up for the winter? Any projects coming up? What are you guys going to be doing other than poking holes a bunch?
We've got a pretty big bunker project. We're converting a bunch of our bunkers in-house to Better Billy bunker. So we just
Oh, there
kind
you
of
go.
do, basically I come up with a square footage that I think we can feasibly do ourselves
Yeah.
every winter. And normally it's in that 15 to 20 bunkers range.
Yeah.
So we're going to be doing that. A lot of work this year with kind of clearing out some sections of the property and opening up some vistas that have
Yeah,
kind
you
of
were
got.
telling me that. I think that's going to be spectacular, and it's going to certainly help the golf course. Are you
Yeah.
going to get Are you going to get a headache from that from members? Or are they going to, or they're not going to be there, so they won't know until the spring when they come back anyway, right?
Yeah, no, they'll love it. We're
Of course they will.
fortunate. Our members are, it's a golf club, not a country club, so we're
Right.
pretty
They're
lucky in
golfers.
that
Yeah.
they playability is our number one objective. And
Perfect.
it doesn't have to look pretty.
Yeah. And it's certainly playable. I mean, it's like I said when I started this, it's a tough, and I would say to any superintendent, and I'm not trying to have guys call you to ask for free golf, but it's a property that everybody should see, I think. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's so unique and it's such a tough environment. And I mean, it's a real testimony. It's why I really wanted to have you join us on the podcast because it's such a great property. And like it's one of those properties that I hadn't been to before I met you and I'd always wanted to go to. And then, I had such a great experience driving around with you, and it was, the whole stories, between your crew and everything going on in there, and the coal mines and everything else. You've got your hands full, my friend.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Hopefully we've got it figured out by the end of next year, but I have
You'll
a
have
feeling.
you'll have it figured out with that. I'm not worried about that at all. And I hate to say this, but I told you this would go very fast, and it has. And we've pushed our hour. And I want to thank you for. First of all, I want to thank you for the time you spent with me, just driving me around and showing me the place. That was quite an experience. And thanks for coming on board here as well. And needless to say, if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. I'm more than happy to get out there again someday and check it out. But don't ask
Awesome.
me to play because I think I'd be petrified about trying to bring a set of sticks out there. It'd be, I think I'd be at the 3 dozen box,
It's
on your property. I can't imagine getting by on just a dozen with my skill set. But that's a testimony to how great that property is. So, Mike, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, appreciate your support. Like I said, if there's anything we can do, don't ever hesitate. And hopefully I get to see you sometime before too long. You going out to San Diego this year?
yes, sir. I'll be
Oh,
there.
good. Oh, come back. We'll have I think Wednesday afternoon at the Earthworks booth, we'll have a bar set up, and we usually have a couple hundred people. A lot of the folks that you might know from Kinloch will probably be at that bar. So please stop by on the Wednesday of the GIS.
Awesome. Thanks,
Perfect.
Joel.
Thanks, everybody. If you're not a member or not signed up, please be so that you can get notifications, and we'll let you know when we get great conversations like we just had with Mike Nowicki at Victoria National. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.